Well, hello, recording. I'm here just in case anyone else shows up. I was going to briefly go through Pierre's update and invite an open floor, but there's no one else here right now. Jeffro, hope you're doing well. If you're the first person to see this, we're thinking of you. Oh, hey, Bruce.
Hey, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
You look like you're back from Montana.
I am
Either
back
that or
from
you brought a
Montana.
shocking amount of your audio equipment with you on the trip.
So funny you mention that. This is the entirety. And I had a little webcam that I took just in,
Oh, nice.
just so I
Just
could.
that's the same one I have, the Logitech.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 1080 Pro. 67 bucks at Walmart. Yeah, I wasn't going to take the whole Sony APS-C and the Capture or the G9 or one of these, or my stupid boom mic. It's cool to see your dogs because dogs were a part of that visit. So I reconnected with a old. Just us on this? Yeah. Oh, we're recording.
But it's being recorded.
Yes.
The recording is on, so we could pause. Like I was going to give it a few minutes to see if anyone else showed up. We did not do an announcement. Jeffro is off right now. I did not pick up to do an announcement. Pierre had a few updates.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Upshot is someone very dear to me went out and had a visit, and they have dogs, a black lab and a shepherd, kind of still a puppy, and went to the dog parks a lot, walked along the river with the dogs. And I have a new appreciation for dogs. I hadn't had a dog in the family since I was a kid, and someone with a well-trained couple of dogs, and they get goofy with each other, but not in a painful way. The one of them, acts like he's the boss, and then he rolls over. Oh, come get me, and it's like, oh, okay, it's healthy.
dogs are very good at playing different roles with each other. Yes.
Yeah, and the dog park interactions. Dogs.
Oh, I love it.
I always knew they were smart, but man, there's a whole nother level.
They're joyful. Maybe is the shorthand that I would do for it, is that dogs really love socializing, and if they're sociable dogs, the more of them there are, the happier they get.
Don't they say dogs can love others more than themselves? Like they can love you more than they actually love themselves, which is pretty.
That sounds realistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a big fan of Mark Maron, and he's famous for having cats. He always ends his podcast with "Boomer lives." This is one of his feral cats that just disappeared one night, and in his mythology, Boomer is still alive somewhere.
Out there somewhere.
Just not where he is. Boomer lives. But yeah, when he's asked, like, it just stuck in my mind when he was talking to one of his guests. He says, "Oh yeah, I don't have dogs. I don't want anything to love me that much." That was that said a lot about.
That was
insightful. Yeah.
That is very pointedly not how I feel about dogs. I love dogs for that. I want to reciprocate that, but yeah, I can get it. I respected that view. Like,
yeah,
I would rather the cats and I have an understanding. They let me know what they need. I give it to them.
Yeah.
But we have our own space. The implication.
More of a transaction. Yeah, it's a transaction with cats. Yeah.
Yeah. Dogs is a partnership. Cats is like cohabitation,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So hello, everyone. I think we only have... Is there any non-Red Hat person on here? No? Okay.
Looks like we got hey, everybody.
Hello. So, I had not appreciated that Jeffro was out, and I don't have a firm agenda here. I think we've got everyone we're going to get, so I guess I will this is like when they when Congress is mostly vacant, but somebody's still there, like reading into the record. But so
That's it. Let the record show.
Let the
We'll have a
record show.
filibuster.
Like, yes, your representative will send a page to read something into the congressional record when no one else is there. Used to mean that would get into a book. So Pierre wanted to highlight, for those who are interested in it, and I always feel guilty that I'm not as up to date on this as I should be, but they have done a fair amount of work to streamline both the sample manifest that we have in the SIG for these sample images, which reflect our sort of early examples of what customer use cases are. They've also enhanced the instructions for building them. So that we had set generally, like, it would be great if you're coming to the SIG and we're advocating that these are the kind of things we want to do and these are the tools we want to do it with and these are the packages and whatnot, easier it is to engage, the better, and they've taken that to heart. And he wanted to highlight that. He's also been very good about giving regular updates on the mailing list. We do have some progress on the auto kernel, and that's being done in public. If Clark were here, I would ask him to speak to it, but he's not, so that's okay. Hello, Whitney, welcome. We're just reading into the congressional record here, and and now she's gone.
Well,
no important representatives here. So, but that is on the cusp of being included into our initial builds, but I don't think we're quite there yet, but it does exist. And what we're hoping to firm up in the next few weeks, I guess in the new year, this will be now, is let's go from building these repositories and showing them, making sure we have the kernel in there, and then eventually start publishing some images. And those are a real good quick start. So images for Vert or Vagrant or the Raspberry Pi 4. We've shown these repeatedly, and we'd like those to be front and center for people who are looking into the SIG. And hopefully, in my dreams, we would, maybe a hardware vendor would like to add theirs to the mix. I don't know. This is the wish fulfillment season.
That would be a good.
All I want for next Christmas is
the hardware vendor.
is several $10,000 automotive reference platforms and some bootable images.
I was glad you touched on that page because it looks like basically the building images page looks basically like a bit of a walkthrough, like, hey, do this, this, and this, you'll be up and running. Is that safe to characterize that page with?
Yes, that's the goal for sure.
Super. I don't imagine if someone ran CentOS Stream 9 as their host instead of what it says here, CS8, that wouldn't make much of a difference, right?
I don't anticipate it would. At the time this was initially written, I think CentOS Stream 9 was in a little bit rougher shape than it is now. Like Apple wasn't available for CentOS Stream 9, for example. I think it is now.
Oh, cool.
But I would bet that it would work. And yeah, then the manifests themselves and the images are being built off of content that's mostly from CentOS Stream.
I like how it touches on the things it does. I kind of have a classical embedded in Linux in the sense of I'm into using a distro that has, RPMs or debs. I want to get into it, like be inside it, install things, do lots of things as root. And I didn't do a lot of Copper, although I've done other, some of these alternative, Fedora build kind of repos where they're individual people things. So this is a nice way to introduce people to things like using Copper. And they're going to take this OS tree thing for a spin because that's the other major change for some folks.
Yeah, just to get a sense of what that really means. And I will say, like, we simultaneously with some of our earlier engagements, just speaking in the abstract here, that if someone has started trying to understand what development looks like on an RPM-based system, if they're perhaps not familiar with that already, we want to have a model where people can get in the sort of silver blue Fedora CoreOS model, we would encourage them to use a toolbox container, log in and start doing So they'd create a container image, and that's where they could do their writes. They could add to their build route and that kind of thing. But I view that as a bit of a barrier to entry for someone who's looking at this for the very first time. So we do also have, this isn't highlighted in the SIG documentation right now, but CentOS 9 Stream itself publishes a vagrant image, which is a pretty popular way of just, here, you got it. You're just 2 commands away from being at a root shell. And then you can do things like DNF install, GCC, C++, and libraries and whatnot. I hope.
It's good of you to kind of point those.
Stefan, am I pronouncing your first name correctly? And you are on mute. Or am I pronouncing it so incorrectly that you don't know that
you're right. It's a bit like Steve.
In fact, so welcome. You're the first person who I recognize as a genuine external participant. So I will just repeat what I said earlier: is that we're sort of in the early stages of the Red Hat holiday shutdown. So Jeff Rowe is off. I did not have a specific agenda other than to highlight some of the work that had been done in the SIG repo to improve documentation. I was going to open the floor to any other discussion people wanted to have, but also make it clear that we could end early. I didn't want to leave anyone hanging. Might have joined. Did you have?
Have we discussed during these meetings the release cadence, and does it need to be brought up during this meeting? Sorry, it's new to me, this concept. So
I don't know as we have. I think if Jeff Rowe were here, he would highlight that this would be the place that we could do it. And I have personally I'll admit, shied away from talking about it, but now maybe the time may have come to start being a little more formal about that. So I wouldn't want to go too deep into it this particular time, Gotti, because we don't have good representation from our stakeholders in the SIG, but seems reasonable.
Understood. Yep. Maybe we can add it to an agenda item for next time when everybody's back from PTO.
Yeah. Anything else people are interested in talking about today? That's automotive related. I could obviously go off a number of directions. And Bruce and I were talking about dogs and social structure earlier. Bruce said it's lovely to hang out with 2 well-trained dogs. And I said, well, then you'd better not come here because my 2 dogs are not.
Stefan here, just a question following the how we want to align on CentOS Stream. Will it be done on a, let's say, a regular basis? Meaning, for example, you want to do it once per month. I don't know how you would reconcile things, but or is it done very regularly, so that CentOS Automotive would be a kind of rolling release as CentOS Stream is rolling?
The latter, what you just described is what, to the extent that we're firming that up, that's what I've been guiding people towards. That I'm really happy with the CentOS Stream model. I think it is a huge improvement for people who want to be engaged with both RHEL and CentOS, and I was hoping to mirror that. So yes, we've talked about formalizing the fact that at least from one of the Red Hat contributions in the SIG is going to be produce a sort of rolling release that mirrors what we anticipate delivering in the in-vehicle product in a way that's as similar as possible to the way that Stream functions in that way for what's going to land in the RHEL product. So whether regardless of what we end up doing in terms of a more formal release cadence, there'll be an element of what we surface in the SIG that will be more of a rolling release that is the sort of Stream-like artifact for the in-vehicle OS. Now, I think to be And Streamlike, I mean in particular CentOS 9 Stream, which is the first. CentOS 9 and RHEL 9 are the first release where we have this model in place essentially from birth, from the GA or launch of the RHEL release. So there are some things that are a little different about the way that CentOS 9 is being managed, CentOS 9 Stream versus RHEL 8. And we're definitely going to take our inspiration from CentOS 9 Stream. So Stefan, if I say, I think we would like one of the key things to be a sort of rolling release artifact, similar to what Stream is. Does that sound sensible, appealing, desirable?
Yeah, I think so, at least in the early phase of the project.
Yeah.
Because my question was a bit like, what's going on if I take the chair of a customer, what's going on for him? I mean, at some point you will want to stabilize your product.
Right.
And so I would expect that this customer will wait for a kind of enterprise release 9 in 3 years from now to get a stable product. So what's going on in between? Maybe those people would like to have, let's say, a punch release or something. I mean, even if the distribution is rolling, which is a good thing in my opinion, at some point people want to have something more stable to develop, and don't care about the rolling stuff. You see, they want just to build something on top of it, with the base being stable. And so I was just wondering how you can reconcile that with CentOS Stream, and before Red Hat Enterprise pops up.
Yeah. And I know this is I hope it's clear from what I said earlier, how this relates to the in-vehicle OS is an evolving topic. I will say that when I say Stream is a rolling release and we like to model that in vehicle, I still view that as because that is all sort of a preview of what's going to land in the product in RHEL, or in our case in the product in Ribos, that it's not a rolling release in the sense that Fedora rolls forward every 6 months. That you're unlikely to see the kind of churn that makes it entirely unsuitable for product development, either in CentOS Stream or in the Ribos equivalent of the in-vehicle equivalent of CentOS Stream, that you would in, say, like I said, what would the SUSE equivalent, for example, is Tumbleweed, right?
Yeah.
Is it still called that? Yeah. No, and that's rolling in the sense that it rolls it rolls through the changes that they would make in between major releases, right? And in that sense, it's not that means that you can't ever really stabilize on it because it isn't promising to be stable.
Yeah, SUSE is a bit different because they somehow they do what Red Hat used to do with CentOS. I mean, as CentOS is discontinued next year, there won't be any, let's say, stable release. It's a bit like, for SUSE, typically Tumbleweed is rolling, and they have the stable release, which is 15, and they talk about service packs. So right. You have a 4.1, 4.2. Now they're 4.3. Next one will be 4. I don't know when, in 6 months from now, maybe. And so that's the same model for me as the one that Red Hat used to have with CentOS. But now, as CentOS disappeared, and we don't have yet the replacement for this kind of, let's say, stable release based on the rolling one. That's where we have maybe a difficulty to explain to the customers, you will have to wait for the next stable one. At least that's what we, when we talk about that with customers, we always say we try to align on Red Hat, and they know that CentOS stopped. CentOS Stream is okay, but CentOS stopped. So they always talk about, but yeah, okay, I understand your roadmap, but what's going on in the 3 years, the 3 upcoming years? If I want to start a product earlier. And with the answer is, your project is probably longer than 3 years, so it's not a problem.
Yeah. No, and it's I want to, I'm aware of some of this discussion, and I don't want to. You might understand this. I'm nervous to wade too far into some of the wider discussions about Stream and this notion that CentOS has been discontinued. Just to highlight again that I would feel perfectly comfortable saying to a RHEL 9 ISV, for example, or customer, that absent the sort of support promises and delivery and whatnot, that they're not going to be ill-served by looking at Stream. Stream is not going to make jump changes equivalent to what Fedora does. It's really just an early preview of what's going to land in the product. And that's when I say I'd like to see something similar for the in-vehicle OS, and we've yet to come up with a name for this, by the way. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think that a customer would, the notion that you would do some work on the Stream, the vehicle equivalent of Stream, and then decide that you really want to formalize it for deployment on the in-vehicle OS, it's not going to be a huge diff between the two, much like working with CentOS 9 Stream gives you a very clear view into what RHEL 9 is going to be. So.
Yeah, definitely. I agree because we know what we are talking about, but
right. And whereas the other thing that you mentioned, like look, I'll map it back to RHEL since I just find that easier to talk about. It's a little bit more. You're saying, what if I want to develop a product that I know won't be mature until RHEL 10, 3 years from now?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And the automotive element of that, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe
right.
it's beside because automotive is maybe can be seen as a bit larger than simply the car.
Sure.
We had some questions for motorcycles, for example, small motorcycle, low-end motorcycles in India, okay, on very low-end boards, okay, and so you understand that those kind of products can be developed in, I would say, maybe not months, but I would say 1 year or two, something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's cheap, and they don't want to invest more on development, so it has to be fast. But at the end, your strategy is the right one from my point of view. It's just that we need some arguments to explain. But that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you thought you were going to have an ECU and a motorcycle in 2 years, I would look at what's coming up here. I think that would be the candidate. But if you're interested in that, and again, this isn't so automotive specific, but I know that there are some changes and some efforts to provide something that looks more like, well, let me put it. In the past, the answer for what should I do to be aligned with what RHEL 10 might be in 3 years, the answer would be follow what's going on in Fedora for a year and a half to 2 years. This is just my impression. Don't take this as gospel. And then watch for early availability or beta availability of RHEL 10 about a year and a half before it comes out. I know there's some effort afoot to have there be something that looks a little bit more like a true rolling RHEL-like release, but I'm not really well up to date on that. I wouldn't feel comfortable representing it. But there are efforts to smooth out the discontinuity that used to happen sometimes, where Fedora would progress for a while and then we would snapshot it and stabilize it in the run up to the next RHEL. That's evolving somewhat, but I can't speak to it in detail. Maybe somebody else on the call knows. Cool.
That was an interesting market point, the idea of a low-cost motorcycle.
Yeah.
That manufacturer may not care about OTA, for example. They just want to get it in. It works good. That's it. But maybe they do. You Wi-Fi connected motorcycle. Maybe that's an exciting thing.
They're Wi-Fi connected scooters. The whole Bird infrastructure and the whole LimeWire infrastructure are all Wi-Fi enabled because you have to unlock them with your phone.
Right.
Indeed.
Yeah, I just got
motorcycle ride sharing. Yeah.
I just got the other day. I got an Amazon recommendation just as I was browsing through Amazon. It was an IoT targeted SIM card. Anyone else seen this?
Oh, they know who you are.
Yeah, so first of all,
toys. Yeah. I've gotten these embedded things pop up in various Google. I'm like, whoa, man. I'm like, oh, that single board computer looks pretty cool, as a matter of fact.
Yes, well, that I was happy to see. What I was less happy to see is we started watching a 1970s uh, sitcom or procedural on Amazon Prime, and it started me showing me ads for dietary supplements to prevent constipation. And once I realized that these aren't the ads that everyone sees for this show. These are being catered towards me. I said, why are they doing that? But no, it was an IoT SIM card. I think it was an LTE 4G compatible, but it was very interesting. The service level was unlimited data, 64 kbps, which I had never seen before.
There's like a kind of an IoT related subset of the 5G protocol suites, and
it was even called that. It was yeah.
Yeah, I forget what, I've got a link somewhere, and basically the 5G networks have plenty of bandwidth, and some of these low bands reach out far, and having the power meters of the world chirp in over 5G is not really going to do much to the network, and so they make it accessible, and they kind of bake it's like the card is probably from an MVNO that uses, made a deal with a carrier for just those low speed protocols, perhaps.
This is what it was.
Yeah, and is it like forever, or do you have to bump
it's
it?
It's a year, so it's $50 for a year. But when I looked it up, the coverage map was a different type of. They had a name. There was a term of art, which I think is what you're referring to, Bruce, where the RF is actually different, and the coverage for their LTE network is not the same as where they support this modulation, actually. But anyway, this is getting far afield of. But yeah, I guess the thought was a Tesla comes with a 4G modem, and they try and upsell you on essentially unlimited high-speed data. A low-cost motorcycle with a quickly developed software load. If it's going to have any connectivity, maybe it's more like this.
We've got about 2 minutes left, so I don't know if I want to surface this, but I think on our last meeting, Ian, we had talked about one of the questions that we heard was, as we're gathering requirements downstream, how do those requirements find their way to this group?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, from your experience just with open source projects in general, when requirements are coming in downstream, are there other mechanisms for capturing requirements upstream where either,
Mm-hmm.
It's
right.
It seems like counterintuitive, right? Because if all the work is flowing upstream to downstream, but all the requirements are coming downstream and trying to find their way back upstream, I don't know. Maybe I'm over indexing.
No, I think as always, it's you very frequently frame these like thoughtful, higher level questions in a way that I think I know what you mean, and I can immediately see how I think this is happening. I would never have thought initially to describe that as downstream requirements finding their way upstream. I think that's an insight. So there are at least two ways that I think it happens. And again, I'll map it to RHEL, and I hope we would be open to both of these and potentially others. But one version is that Red Hat, by virtue of aggregating all these upstream projects and having subject matter expertise in it, when we get a downstream requirement for RHEL, one value we can offer is that we're engaged in the upstream project. So we essentially, it may come, whoever it came from or whatever collection of customers it came from, we will bring it to the upstream, either as an RFE, or maybe we will even development and propose it as a feature or something like that. So essentially, Red Hat is the courier for those requirements. Another thing that, depending on how advanced the customer is, they tend to move closer to doing that by themselves over time. Like more advanced customers might. We had a RHEL customer that made extensive use of the Unix auto mounter. This is a very old technology. This is an old example, but they got to the point where they knew they needed it. They knew their own requirements so well that both Red Hat and the customer were active in the upstream directly. to transmit these to that upstream project. How it relates in the SIG, like would we have some sort of formal requirements gathering for automotive in the SIG? I don't entirely know. Like I don't know what if you were to ask this question of the CentOS community more broadly, how do downstream requirements make their way into CentOS? I don't know that there's one answer. I suspect they'd give at least the two broad examples I did and then some other things. I don't know how helpful that is, but that's my off the cuff. I mean, we've got other, at least Bruce has been in the open source Red Hat game for a while. He might have some.
No, that was a good little story there that you put out. Because I've been, where I was in consulting, and so I would be out there actually embedded with the client, become part of their team for some period of time, help them create a technology. And for them, what it looked like is the ability to open a case that turns into an RFE and then get exposed to a little bit of the internal process involved around building the business case and how and when Red Hat might take that thing up as the creation of a new feature. And then that allows the client to not have to get pulled into the upstream unless they're interested. A lot of clients are interested and they oh yeah, where's that dialogue happening? And others are like, hey, let me know when the feature's ready. Thanks.
Right. Yeah.
And it's cool that it can be done at those various kind of engagement levels through the same little interface. Because BZ is open, the upstream projects pretty much have open mailing lists or repos.
BZ is Bugzilla, by the way.
Yeah, sorry.
So like which is not, we're at pains to point out, Bugzilla is not a support tool. You've heard that before. Bugzilla is a tracker that we provide for both RHEL bugs and Fedora bugs, and I think it's used for some layered products. Ours is an instance of that, by the way. The Bugzilla tool is used elsewhere, but we have an instance of it. But yeah, so Bruce, your point is that one way they get upstream is by them being product, sort of standard software company interactions with Red Hat and customers, and then Red Hat provides the translation layer to the upstream and normalize how you consume open source software, with a single point of contact. But that's not the only way to do it. Witness the fact that we have some potential customer partners attending these meetings, and we'd like to get more. I guess that's the third example. Another way that they get is that people participate in the upstream, but not by contributing code, but by participating in sort of umbrella groups like this SIG or other things. Desperately trying to get a read as to whether you're writing. I'm always trying to please. So I take that as a good sign, but then I can't read your facial expression because you're looking down.
No, this is helpful, because like I said, I'm super new to the open source way, and as a UXer and a UX researcher and a designer, I'm saying, okay, are there requirements that I can go out and research for the upstream community as like my form of contribution to this community? Is it, I see Mike on this call. Is it Mike and I going out and like dreaming up a use case and saying, hey, this would be really interesting in the automotive space. Here's our research as to why we think it would be interesting. How would we enable this on top of, what we're putting together? Like where do ideas come from in addition to requirements? Like I just see a very fertile area for experimentation upstream beyond just the bits, but the use cases, right? Like, for example, a use case that kind of drew me to this program was, could we end the traffic stop? Because we have the technology, right? Like, so we have ADAS, right? So I'm never going to swerve again, potentially. If I have sensors on my brake lights, can I get a maintenance request sent in advance so they just send me the replacement part, or my automotive service team is like, we know your brake lights are going to go out 3 weeks in advance, so you're solving like a social problem, but with this technology. So those are some of the ideas that come up to me when I think about where places where design can interact with like the open source model.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very cool. And I mean, I will say, my impression is that the bread and butter of the kind of upstream downstream interactions that we've tended to facilitate in the past have occurred at a much lower level than what you're talking about.
Okay.
So like it's at the level of this. So, but that doesn't mean. First of all, I could be wrong. It could just be that I've always been at a lower level. And also it doesn't mean that there isn't like the opportunity to bring some of this higher level design thinking upstream conversation. So like, I mean,
do a little bit
you could, yeah, go ahead, Bruce. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to do a little bit of a mapping to what Nick was saying. Suppose somebody has a really great application. This happens in RHEL all the time. They want RHEL to hold up an application. What they'll come to the project, in this case, it would be the CentOS Automotive SIG. They would say, hey, there's a dependency for this really cool app, and we need it to be in the product. So, hey, CentOS SIG people, put that package in it instead of in Apple. And then there are talks about, hey, does that create a lot of work? Is it widely applicable? And so that kind of discussion represents a little bit of the mapping between what Nick talks about with a high level idea and a running app is somewhere. They've got some machine somewhere. They got this app cooking, and they want to get it. Hey, will this run in the CentOS Automotive SIG? Because that is a known. It's got enough stability and enough movement, and we want to take it for a spin. So that it sort of sketches out what that would mean to the CentOS group, I suspect. And in a best case scenario, the person actually engages. They'll come into this group and say, especially notional stuff. This is the data that's the hardest to get. It's one thing if somebody opens up a case or opens up an issue in the repo. It's another if they show up and actually just say, hey, I'm sketching out this idea in my head, because it could be a really useful.
Interesting. Thanks for the education, y'all. Yeah, because I'm curious. I know like one of the requirements that came up on this call last week was just how do we know what the expected boot time is? So how does that bubble up to this group, right? Where it's coming from a potential partner, but it's probably relevant to a lot of partners. So just exploring like how ideas and requirements could come from the upstream channel, and then how those requirements find their way from the downstream requirements that are being captured to the upstream communities. So this is really helpful. Thank you. I know we're a few minutes over, so thanks for taking 10 minutes.
No, that's good.
Over
I mean,
just to complete, I would add that you have to think about that with on the long run, maybe, because when you design the system for a car, it has to last for maybe 10 years. And from it changes the perspective from your upstream or downstream project, because it's a bit different for even small companies or even bigger companies to support something for 10 years. And in that case, you want to push it to upstream projects so that the effort to support your product or your component on the long run would be split on multiple actors, I would say. So you share the effort of maintaining something with other people in the community instead of keeping the stuff for you only and have to support it yourself, which maybe, depending on what the product is, it could be easy or not. And besides that, you may have some proprietary stuff that you want to put in your product. And of course, you won't be able to push that to any upstream project, any upstream open source project. Probably so. There is a mitigation to compromise to find between what you want to keep for you and what you want to upstream, and also what you upstream can be used by other people. That's the point. There are 3 different factors for me that can help to take the decision. And obviously, the time is another factor. So at the end, 4 factors at least.
Interesting.
Yeah, that longevity thing invokes all kinds of. We've had discussions about how long of an expected lifespan. Some people drive their vehicles 30 years. Okay, and then now we're dealing with flash wear out. Do we say the car doesn't work anymore because we've got too many errors on the flash? Or do we say, okay, there's some features that don't work, and some of that's going to be decided by the end application developer? Probably some guidance in the project. There might be a flash wear monitor that says, hey, throw something in the system logs. Hey, it's time to start thinking about new flash or decom. Those things both think about the support model as well as shape product itself. It's an interesting and unique place. This is one of the few places where you have 10-year types of life. We have some customers with very long, let's say, multi-decadal lifestyles for their products and support needs.
You said lifestyles.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to forge a multi-decadal lifestyle myself, by the way. So.
Nice. Yeah, so they're really into their thing.
Right in the thick of it, actually. Maybe about halfway through.
Yeah.
So.
People on these interplanetary missions.
For sure.
They start their career as an intern, and they're like designing the thing, and then, one of my friend's dad was on the Viking Lander team, and that was basically the Viking Lander was his entire career at NASA, basically because of the time span involved.
I saw that's a fun one too.
Yeah, so kind of similar here. We're going to see vehicles that are running this for a really long time, and the underlying, like if you're depending on OTA, they're about to decom the 3G system. 10 years from now, the whatever we use for OTA would be different. So lots of interesting things about 10-year plus life cycles. Glad you brought that up.
And I do think I feel like that's actually why something that is drawn off of what we already do with RHEL is, I guess that's the point you were making, Bruce, is appealing. That was the thing that we were able to bring early on to the Linux space, was a slower update cadence and a longer, more traditional support life cycle. And now there's a market for that in automotive potentially. I know I just read an interview with the current software lead on Voyager. She was highlighting that she had not been born when the mission launched. That's how long that platform has been. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, folks. I would value my participation, drawing my participation this month to a close because I need a little bit of time before what I'm doing next. I'm going to try and remember to send out an invite. I don't think we'll do the office hours portion of this because it'll be right before the new year. I don't think anyone will be around for it, so I'll try and send an announcement out, and then we'll pick these back up in the new year. Sound good?
Yeah,
perfect.
Makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. Have a safe holiday.
Yeah, great
Be well.
seeing you all. Have a good holiday time. Be well.
Cheers, everybody.